Welcome back to Sunday Live here at Citizen Television. We've been talking about the extension of the school closures for another month. Joining us now live, Amos Kaburu, Program Manager with PAL, Education Expert. Right. Amos, thank you for joining us on Sunday Live. Real quick, let me ask you the main question. What does this mean, the extension by another 6 weeks? What does that mean?
Thank you, Jeff. It is not the first time that we are having interruptions on the school calendar. We have previously had disruptions. And what we know as we speak now, the school calendar can accommodate disruptions up to 8 weeks. That means we can accommodate up to 2 months because you have school holidays that were supposed to be there in April, in August, and then schools are supposed to close for the long holiday from November all the way into December. Second term itself also has other forms of disruptions that include sporting activities, music festivals. There is a half term. So there is a probability or there is a possibility of accommodating certain levels of disruptions. And from a very, very pessimistic interruption, if we are able to pick up school even in July, we are able to accommodate this disruption. But anything post 5th of July, I think now that will be getting into a fishing expedition.
All right, Amos. So that means they can make up time later on in the year should they miss at least 2 months. More than that will be a problem.
Yes. We can make up time because remember that what we lost in first term was basically a week. It was not even 3 weeks because schools were more or less having just a week to start the end of term exams. And then we know what happens in the last week. That will be marking and trying to clear up stuff. So some schools even start closing schools as early as maybe 2 weeks or the official closing date. So we do not have a lot of disruptions as far as first term is concerned. But it's usually second term, which is very, very delicate. When you talk of the candidature class, we have seen a lot of effort in schools trying to clear the syllabus by September so that the rest of the time is spent doing revisions. You also have to understand that there is nothing cast in stone that examination results have to be released in November or December. So we still have the whole of 2020 within which we could look at how to hoggle over and just accommodate these kind of things that we were not able to do. But I know that there are still more fundamental issues as far as the school term is concerned that perhaps we are also able to address even in this particular cast that is happening now.
Amos, real quick, what would that mean for KCPE and KCSE? Would that have to be rolled over into the 2021?
Now, as I said, if we have disruptions that will be happening post-July, then we may be forced to begin thinking of probably rolling into the new year. But if we are able to, if the situation is managed, that is the infections are kept low and the school can be opened, whether from a model of partial normalcy where we begin by having the candidature class going back to school, then we may not necessarily be forced to roll the examination into next year. Because remember, as we have said, up to about 3 years ago, exams will continue all the way towards the end of November. But it's only that where this year, in the last 3 years, where we've had a lot of adjustments in terms of trying to finish up all these exams just before November. So we still have the whole of December, especially like for primary schools, which only need 3 days to sit for the exams. That can still be stretched even to happen around late November. There is nothing really cast on stone. And we know that the effort that goes into marking primary school exams are only around the writing exams of initial and composition. But the rest of the papers are automated in terms of marking. For the secondary schools, as we have said, there can still be a provision for the marking to happen in December. We have seen what has happened in the last few years where we've increased the number of examiners and therefore even managed to have exams marked in a record time of about 2 weeks. So which means that if you deploy additional resources, even if exams were to be stretched up to around 15th of December, we can still clear the year when we have results. if the worst case scenario happens that we can even still have exams in December, then we can still have cases where results are released in January. Because even when results are released in December, very few children get placed into tertiary institutions in January. Most of the tertiary institutions begin placing students around May, and others such as universities will be stretching all the way to September. So I think this is just the way we have conditioned ourselves in terms of exams, which of course is also another discussion altogether. At what point did we become extremely dependent on exams, or at what point did it really become that our education system is determined by exams? I think it's a critical question that we need now to interrogate, even in the context of the ongoing education reforms. Why are we placing a lot of premium on exams, or is there any other mechanism through which we can measure what our children are able to do, rather than waiting for these exams that happen at the end of 8 years and at the end of the 4 years, what in the technical terms in psychometrics we refer to as summative assessments and evaluations?
Okay, Amos, and I'll be asking you about that later in terms of COVID-19 and this pandemic causing a complete overhaul of the school system as we know it. But, you said that if we don't go past the 2-month closure period, that we're not in the danger zone. However, the kids have been out since mid-March. And there have been questions about online learning and remote learning, and whether that is adequate enough to replace the normal learning that they're used to in class. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Ideally, what is happening, there is no learning that is happening right now, because even when teachers are in school and children are directly interacting with their teachers, we have a large proportion of children who struggle to get anything. And so the kind of learning that will be happening right now is extremely minimal, because children get concepts easily when there is a lot of interaction. But what happens when we move education onto online platforms? When we know, for instance, that only 40% of the Kenyan households have television sets, so what happens to the 60%? What happens to an additional 30% who do not have radios? What happens to the over 70% who do not have access to smartphones? And even those with the smartphones, only maybe about 20% will still be having internet, which is reliable. The kind of internet that you have in Nairobi, which is 4G. The internet itself is not even affordable. So we cannot actually at this point in time argue that online learning is taking place, because the kind of homes that we have are not configured for learning to take place. Even our own school systems and environments really struggle to ensure that learning takes place. And that's why those of us who have been in this space and even doing a lot of assessments and issues of research, we have established that close to 10% of the children who are leaving class 8 do not have basic competences in mathematics. They are close to 5% cannot even read a simple grade 2 text. So what therefore happens when you relinquish the responsibility of learning to the homes which are not configured for learning? You are handing over the responsibility to parents who lack capacity. You have got certain subjects that require a lot of interaction between teachers and the students, practical subjects such as chemistry, such as biology. So what happens in that case? There is very little that will be happening. What we should right now agree is that perhaps we are only making some little effort to ensure that there is limited loss of learning that is taking place, because children will naturally regress if there is no effort to put them in a context where learning is continually happening. Then they are even going to lose whatever they have. And that's why we have the common phrases such as, we are doing a revision. Why are we doing revision? So that we avoid the loss of learning. So let's be very bold and look at ourselves at this point in time and say that there is very little learning that is taking place right now.
So you feel
learning is happening when there is a lot of anxiety, there is a lot of uncertainty. Children are equally frustrated and traumatized. They don't know what will happen as far as COVID-19 is concerned. Honestly, there can reasonably be no learning that is taking place.
So you feel the alternative is revision in this time, that learning cannot happen outside of the classroom?
Yes, and it may not even be optimal revision, because even revision needs to happen within particular contexts. So we cannot even say that this revision, it is well designed, because this is a situation that is unprecedented. Nobody looked forward to it. If you look at the kind of material that we have, which is available, whether on the market or on the shelf, it is still not appropriate for children to learn by themselves. Children require a lot of guidance from the teachers, because that is how education system has been designed. It is not been designed in a way that children can go out there and look for information on their own self. So there is a lot of dependence on the part of the teacher. The teacher still dominates the learning process. So in the absence of the teacher, the children can do very little on their own. So we should just say that this is a way maybe to try and keep them a little bit busy. I wouldn't even call it to be revision. Maybe just some form of keeping them a little bit busy because students are used to routine, because students are used to a certain way of doing things. And now since this cannot happen, let's have at least something that keeps them going. But otherwise, you cannot say that even revision is happening. Very little learning is taking place at this point in time, Vicky.
You know what, Amos, you've painted a very bleak picture, and it's probably the truth right now. And there are a lot of very concerned parents, a lot of very concerned learners right now listening to you, watching you right now. What's the bottom line? I mean, because we cannot determine how long this pandemic is going to last. So does everyone repeat a year? I mean, is that the worst case scenario?
Actually, that's actually the worst case scenario, as you put it, Jeff. The worst case scenario is if we do not manage this situation within time and by keeping to the guidelines provided by the Ministry of Health, then let's agree that many other sectors are going to seriously suffer, and education is going to be one of them. So the best we can do is to agree, as President Lincoln would have said, we must either learn to live together as brothers or we perish like fools. So we have no option but to try and find a solution in the shortest time possible. There are things that we'll say are short term. There could be things that we can say are long term, but then we also need a transitional mechanism. What moves us from the short term towards the long term? And for instance, we have to confront certain questions that we do not want to ask ourselves. What is the essence of an examination at the end of grade 8? If now we are talking about 100% transition, why should we be thinking of again subjecting these children to an examination at the end of the year? Why don't we still in January place all these children? So why are we making one step forward and again making two steps backward? So we should be bold and candid and ask ourselves, what do we really want to achieve? And again, it also speaks to our culture as a country. We had a very good opportunity in terms of smoothing these inequalities. Because what is happening right now, Jeff, one of the challenges, very practical. What kind of technological solutions are happening? There are people who are learning using Google Classroom. There are people who are learning using M-Lesson. There's no standardized curriculum. There is no standardized material that is being offered. So even the 40% who are using TV, even the 60% who are using the radio, even the 30% who are using the Kenya Education Cloud, and the other 20% who are attending high-cost private schools. And we know just about 10 schools in this country which charge over 1 million Kenya shillings per term. The kind of curriculum they are offering is not suitable for everyone. So you have to be thinking of that child in Turkana. You have to think of that child in Tarasai, in Tana River. You have to think of that child in Chakalini, in my own Lugari constituency. What opportunities do they have for them to use technology as a form of learning? And the answer obviously is no. And we should not be killing ourselves because this is not something that any one of us looked forward to it. Unfortunately, we had a very good opportunity to plan for all these kind of things. The digital learning program that was to start in 2013 was a perfect opportunity. What did we do? With all the billions wasted down the drain, by right now would have afforded to give every child a laptop or every child a tablet. Right now, maybe we'll be talking about 70% of the children who are able at least to access this kind of online learning. Now, at the same time, we have to make sure that the left hand and the right hand are speaking to each other, unless we make technology to be affordable. Because as we speak now, if you do not have Wi-Fi in your house, how will you be streaming throughout the day? How will your children learn? So you have got more than one child in school. You need a smartphone, you need Wi-Fi. If you are going to spend 100 shillings to get 1 GB, are you going to be buying food or are you going to be buying bundles? So you have to make a trade-off. And obviously, households are forced to make a decision to go for basic and essential commodities such as food and whatever that will take them going, including masks, and now we are adding to it sanitizers. So nobody will be thinking about bundles. And in any case, let's ask ourselves, Jim, when these 70% are not accessing learning, what will happen when schools close? Schools operate within particular parameters, and school accountability mechanisms will want to ensure that the teacher has covered the curriculum. So what will happen if you open schools and 70% of the children tell you that they didn't learn that content? Schools will basically open and go to where they left on 13th of March. That is what is going to happen. And let's just be very candid and tell ourselves that yes, we may have aspirations that we can move our education on to technology, but this is not going really to serve at this point in time.
All right.
That's ambitious, that is aspirational, but it's not going to take off in the year 2020.
Amos reminds me a lot of George Orwell's Animal Farm. All animals are equal, but some
are more
than others.
Let's continue that conversation tomorrow morning on Hot 96. Amos, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Jeff.
Amos Kaburu there, program manager at PAL Network, also education expert. Lots of tweets and SMSs coming through.
That is right. We have one here from Oyage from Sotik saying, how can the government help those children that don't have radios on their homes, from their homes rather, for learning? Another one here from Gidao saying, we can't support the government saying KCPE and KCSE must be conducted and our children haven't really learned this year. Of course, poking holes into that issue of whether digital or online learning is actually happening right now.
Yeah, I've got a text here from Dominic, all the way from Minneapolis, Minnesota. He says, let the schools remain closed because over here in the States, they're closed until next year. Also an SMS from Paul in Machakos. You say, I support CS Magoha 100%. Says, safety of students is more important than the education curriculum. He says the school calendar can be adjusted after COVID-19 pandemic. Sick or in worst case scenario, dead students cannot do exams.
Wow. The reality on the ground.
Absolutely. Keep tweeting and texting at Koinange
at Vicky Rubadiri.
At Citizen TV Kenya, our SMS line is 22422. Sunday Live.